everyone, and good day, Ma'am Villanueva. We are from Group 5 in Rizal 101 of Bachelor of Special Needs Education of first year. We will be reading, interpreting, and discussing the summary of NOLI TANGERE and its few thoughts and insights about the different situations in the story. The NOLI TANGERE is a novel written by Jose Rizal, the one of the national heroes of the Philippines. Published in 1887, it criticized the colonial rule Spain had over the Philippines during the time. Its sequel is El Filibusterismo. The end of October, presumably in 1881, the wealthy Capitan Tiago hosts a dinner at his house. He then introduces Crisostomo Ibarra to his guests, who has recently returned from his studies in Europe. As Ibarra greets Padre Damaso, he is shocked when Damaso denies ever having been friends with his late father, Don Rafael. During the dinner, Damaso belittles Ibarra's studies abroad, embarrassing him and causing him to leave the party. Walking to Plaza Binondo, Ibarra is approached by Lieutenant Guevara, who informs him that his father was imprisoned for accidentally killing a Spanish tax collector and died while incarcerated. Having also been branded a filibuster for subscribing to the newspaper El Correo del Ultramar, at his hotel, Ibarra is troubled thinking about his father's death. Meanwhile, Maria Clara, Capitan Tiago's daughter and Ibarra's fiancée, arrives at the party. The narration then explains the history of Capitan Tiago, who had agreed with Don Rafael to marry their children. Later on, Ibarra visits Maria Clara and speaks with her in private, and the two prove their love for each other by showing that they have saved mementos from each other. As Ibarra later rides through Manila in his carriage, he is bothered by the lack of progress in the country. Padre Damaso then speaks to Capitan Tiago, angrily objecting to Ibarra and Maria Clara's marriage. Capitan Tiago reluctantly agrees.
It is explained that the town of San Diego in Laguna produces various crops, situated along Laguna Lake as well as beside a forest owned by Ibarra's grandfather, Don Saturnino. The narration then goes to the two prominent figures of San Diego, the parish priest, Padre Salvi, and the alferez of the Guardia Civil. Two grave diggers converse at San Diego's cemetery, one of them explaining that he was ordered by Damaso to dig up Don Rafael's body and bury it in the Chinese cemetery. Because it was raining at that time, he instead dumped it in the river. On All Saints' Day, Ibarra and the servant arrive at the cemetery, searching for Don Rafael's body. Ibarra asks the grave digger, and given the story, angrily leaves. At the cemetery gate, Ibarra runs into Padre Salvi and, mistaking him for Damaso, attacks him. Meanwhile, the sage Piloso Potasio leaves the cemetery, having been unable to find the skull of his dead wife. He sees the young sacristans, the brothers Basilio and Crispin, and then discusses the concept of purgatory with Don Filippo. Inside the church, Basilio and Crispin are worried due to Crispin being accused of stealing 2 gold pieces by the sacristan mayor and not being allowed to live. At their home, the boys' mother, Sisa, prepares their dinner and is shocked when only Basilio arrives home later that night. The boy telling her that Crispin stayed behind at the church. That night, Basilio dreams of his brother being beaten and killed by the sacristan mayor and Padre Salvi. The following day, Sisa travels to to the church and tries to convince Padre Salvi to release Crispin, only to find out from a sacristan that Crispin is not at the church and that the Guardia Civil are searching for her 2 sons. Elsewhere, Ibarra, wanting to start a school in the town, converses with the schoolmaster about their obstacles in doing so. So Crisostomo Ibarra returned to his hometown in San Diego, Laguna, and he went to his father's graveyard in San Diego Cemetery. Ibarra thought that his father's body was buried there, but Ibarra was angry and felt disrespected when he knew that Padre Damaso ordered the grave diggers to bury his father's body in the Chinese cemetery, but it ended up that it was dumped in the river by the grave digger. And so Basilio and Crispin, the young sacristan, were abused by Padre Salvi. Ibarra finds out what the priest and the sacristan mayor did to the young sacristans. So Ibarra wants to stop them from being a sacristan, and he wants them to study.
At a meeting in the town hall, Don Filipo's proposal regarding the fiesta is ultimately rejected in favor of the curate. Meanwhile, Sisa arrives home and is arrested by the Guardia Civil to get her sons to surrender. Publicly humiliated, Sisa begins going insane. Later on, Ibarra invites both Maria Clara and Padre Salvi to a picnic in the woods. Both accepts, Salvi doing so to prove he has no ill feelings. Ibarra, Maria Clara and their friends then go fishing on the lake. When the boat's pilot, Elias, discovers a crocodile in the fishing nets, he jumps into the lake. Ibarra follows him and ends up saving his life. On the way to the picnic, Padre Salvi watches Maria Clara and her friends bath. The Guardia Civil later arrives in search of Elias, who is actually a fugitive being pursued for attacking both the Alferez and Padre Damaso. At her house by the lake, Elias' sweetheart Salome waits for him to arrive. When he does, she asks him to accompany her to Mindoro to live with her relatives. Elias refuses, stating he doesn't want her caught up with his past and telling her she should marry an honorable man. Before Elias leaves, Salome makes a final request that he live in her house after she gone. Later on, Ibarra consults with Filosofo Tasio, who advises him not to continue with his plans to start a school in order not to anger the friars and government officials. On the eve of the town's fiesta, numerous people volunteer resources for the school. On a walk with her friends, Ibarra and Maria Clara encounter a leper, whom Maria Clara gives her locket. 3 correspondences are then shown between 6 individuals, including Ibarra and Maria Clara, the latter being worried of Ibarra's being ill. As a procession takes place on the last day of the fiesta, the people also go to church to listen to Padre Damaso's sermon. In his sermon, the priest makes vague swipes at Europe-educated natives like Ibarra. At the end of the sermon, Ibarra is warned by Elias that his life is in danger. During the ceremony of laying the school's cornerstones, Ibarra is almost killed in an incident involving the derrick, with a casualty instead being the man operating it. Elias later visits Ibarra at his house and warns him that he has enemies, affirming that he is acting to pay his debt to Ibarra for saving his life. At dinner, Ibarra almost kills Padre Damaso for insulting his father's memory before Maria Clara Ibarra almost kills Padre Damaso for insulting his father's memory before Maria Clara intervenes and is excommunicated by the priest as a result. The townspeople discuss the incident. Capitan Tiago informs Maria Clara and Tia Isabel that he has agreed to break her engagement to Ibarra to marry Alfonso Linares, a relative of Padre Damaso. Ibarra then meets with the Governor General, who assures him that he will speak with the Archbishop to undo the excommunication. During another procession, Tasio makes sarcastic remarks on the images of the saints at the alferez house. His wife Doña Consolacion maltrata, who is then put under the care of a doctor. Later on, while Maria Clara, her friends Don Filippo and Padre Salvi are watching a play, Ibarra joins them. Padre Salvi has Don Filippo prohibit Ibarra from watching. He is met with Filippo's refusal and walks out as a result. Later on at Ibarra's house, Lucas asks for money from Ibarra, his brother having been the derrick operator was killed in the accident. Don Tiburcio, his wife Doña Victorina, and Linares arrive at Capitan Tiago's house. Linares introduces himself to Padre Damaso, who also arrives. Meanwhile, Lucas approaches Padre Salvi for money. Maria Clara, still sick, takes confession with Padre Salvi, who later leaves shaken. Gus, Elias visits Capitan Pablo, the leader of some bandits, and asks them to stop with their violence acts. He also informs them that they can enlist the help of Ibarra in obtaining reforms for the country. In the cockpit, Lucas approaches the brothers Bruno and Tarsilo, recruiting them in an attack on the town's barracks. The attack is supposedly organized by Ibarra. As a conflict arises between Doña Victorina and Doña Consolacion, Ibarra attempts to see Maria Clara at her house only to see her with Linares. Later on, Elias speaks to Ibarra on the lake, attempting to convince him to work for reforms. Ibarra argues that certain institutions are necessary evils for society. Elias then narrates the misfortune of his family, starting with his grandfather, who was falsely accused of burning a warehouse. Later on, Padre Salvi informs Linares, Maria Clara, and Capitan Tiago that Ibarra's excommunication has been lifted, and Ibarra only needs to ask Padre Damaso's forgiveness. Ibarra insists on seeing Maria Clara. As Lucas discusses the planned attack with 3 men at the cemetery, Elias learns that said attack will implicate. Don Filippo visits the Il Filosofo Tasio and informs him of his resignation. Salvi warns the alferez of attacks. Elias similarly warns Ibarra that he will be blamed and help he has disposed of letters that could implicate him. Elias learns that the Spaniard that caused his family misfortune is actually Ibarra's great-grandfather. When the attack breaks out, Ibarra is arrested by the Guardia Civil. Elias sets fire to Ibarra's house to destroy any evidence that could implicate him. As rumors circulate across the town, the Guardia Civil torture Tarsilo to make him confess the mastermind behind the attack. Tarsilo dies refusing to confess. Later on, Ibarra is let out of his cell along with the other prisoners to be transferred to the provincial capital. As he walks, he is cursed by the townspeople.
Various people discuss the failed rebellion. As Capitan Tiago entertains guests, Maria Clara spots Ibarra, who has been freed by Elias from prison. Ibarra goes to her and she apologizes to him for agreeing to marry Linares. It is also revealed that Padre Damaso is Maria Clara's real father. As the Guardia Civil pursue Elias and Ibarra, Elias jumps into water for them to go after him, saving Ibarra. Distraught after learning of Ibarra's apparent death, Maria Clara begs Padre Damaso to let her enter the nunnery, to which he accepts. On Christmas Eve, Basilio eventually locates Sisa and runs after her into the forest, where she dies. Basilio faints, and when he comes to see Elias and instructed by him to cremate him and his mother, which he does. The narration then discusses the various characters' fate in the aftermath of events.
The major characters of this story are Crisostomo Ibarra, Maria Clara, Elias, Capitan Tiago, Padre Damaso, Padre Salvi, Piloso Potasio, Sisa. The trivia of this novel is that the novel's title is Latin for Touch Me Not, taken from the words of the risen Jesus to Mary Magdalene. Rizal explained that he wanted to write about the topics that were untouchable, such as the Spanish friars. The novel's deleted chapter concerns Elias and his sweetheart Salome. It was originally going to be the 25th chapter before Rizal removed it due to financial constraints. The novel most probably takes place in the year 1881 due to the abolition of the tobacco monopoly being mentioned and the Guardia Civil being said to exist for nearly 15 years at that point. The moral of the story that we have gathered from NOLI TANGERE by Dr. Jose Rizal, which is still relevant today, is to promote nationalism and to cultivate an acceptance of change in ourselves. We must support our country by obeying the law, having Philippine culture, and comprehending the real purpose of the nation by working together to make it better. NOLI TANGERE by Jose Rizal urges us to consider our attitudes toward and actions in behalf of our nation. The novel's message, which still holds true now, is to support nationalism and learn to embrace change in ourselves.